Well, welcome everyone to Build St. Louis, the region's new podcast that captures and shares the very heartbeat of construction and real estate development. I'm your host, Kerry Smith, owner of Information Works, and in this episode, we're delighted to welcome Steve Zuber, a partner at BARBERMURPHY, downstate Illinois' largest commercial real estate company. Steve specializes in brokering industrial deals across southern and central Illinois and St. Louis. And he has more than a decade of hands-on experience in that, specifically in industrial real estate transactions, including manufacturing and warehousing, among many other things. Steve actively serves on the executive committee of Leadership Council Southwestern Illinois, and he just completed service as president of the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors St. Louis chapter as president. Steve, welcome to Build St. Louis. We're glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Kerry.
You bet. You bet. Well, let's dive right into our topic, which is the rise of speculative industrial space in the St. Louis region. And I'm just really curious about this topic, just to hear. I know I've talked with you for more than a year or two about how scarce industrial space is in our region, and particularly on the St. Louis side. So I'm super interested in what you're able to share today about build to suit and about the intense demand for industrial space. If you want to give us like a high level on what you're seeing, that would be terrific.
Yeah, what we're seeing in the market right now is the supply of industrial warehouse space is just at its all-time low as far as I'm concerned. We've got so many people that are looking for space that does not exist. And a lot of people, when they're looking, they usually don't give themselves enough time when their lease is nearing renewal to actually look at build to suit, which right now can take over a year. Usually it used to be about 8 months to build from the ground up. And now we're looking at probably a year and 2 months. So it's tough for people to plan if they're not planning for it ahead of time and giving themselves enough time to look at build to suit. And if there's one person, there's 30 people out there willing to build to suit any facility. What the market's really missed in this particular situation are available buildings that are ready to go. So can you hold for 1 second, Kerry?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So as I was saying, the demand is just ridiculous. You know, when we had post-pandemic, the pandemic just accelerated e-commerce, and Amazon just went on a building tear, and they were putting up millions and millions of square feet across the country. And that same effect during the pandemic, most manufacturing and warehousing companies were working just in time. And now then after the logistics supply chain melted, they went to just in case, which that just increased that further demand of warehouse space. And then the construction prices went through the roof. Delivery schedules were pushed out. A lot of companies that were manufacturing overseas didn't have control of the quality of their products and when it was actually going to get to the United States. So a lot of this, when you hear about all the harbors and the ports, the backup of all of the materials, people start onshoring. So now you've just got this, headwinds that are just, coming at the same time. And that demand is just through the roof right now. So we have seen just millions and millions of square feet being built in St. Louis and just getting filled before most of those warehouses were completed. And this is the big institutional product like North Point, TriStar, Panattoni have been producing, and it's just been gangbusters. Unprecedented times in what we're seeing in building, construction, and just supply and demand. So I think that's going to continue for the next, foreseeable future. Rental prices have just gone through the roof because, it's obviously a seller and a landlord market right now. And if you're looking for space right now, you find something, you got to jump on it. And the prices have just probably within the last couple of years have shot up from $1 to $3 per square foot, more than it had in the past.
Where are they now, would you say? Oh, I'm sorry. Where would you say they're now? Like on a 250,000 square foot to 500,000 square foot, like modern industrial. What is it per square foot? Like where has it gone from?
You're going to be in the $4 to $5 square foot range. Triple net.
Wow. So more than doubled.
Yeah, for where it was 3 to 4 previously.
And this is just, you said it so well, but we're talking about just owners. We're not talking about investors. We're talking about people who operationally need the space yesterday.
Correct. The investors, the biggest thing in fact affecting them right now are the interest rates. And interest rates have risen over the last year, and they're going to continue to rise. And it's affected the residential market, real estate more than anything. The investment market, it's affecting that as well. And then the developers, they're having a tough time financing some of these huge developments because of the interest rates. So, but in the end users that are out there, if they need it for their business, they're moving full force ahead.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit, maybe compare the capacity to even find space and build to suit or speculative warehouse on the Illinois side of the St. Louis metro region versus St. Louis. I mean, going in reverse order to St. Louis first, I would think how far out they must just be out of ground almost until you get what, 30, 40, 50 miles further
You're out
out?
in Fenton, you're out past O'Fallon, Wentzville, where you're seeing most of the development. I have seen in Illinois in the past year more Missouri brokers looking for space that doesn't exist. They're also looking for more land. We've probably sold more land in the past year than anything as well, just because there's no space and it's going to have to be built. We've got one building, a 62,000 square foot spec building in Eastport Plaza that Money Development Corporation is putting up. And we've had, and that's really the only spec building under 100,000 square feet that's scheduled in the market. There's 3 or 4 other build to suit type of buildings, but this is an actual spec building that's going up, and we've had a ton of interest in that building, and it should be available April 1st of this year. And I think we'll have it filled up pretty soon. But speculatively, that's the one thing our market in Illinois is missing, is anything in that 100 to even 200,000 square foot and below that range. There's plenty of space in that 200 to a million square foot, but it's the 200 and below that we're really hurting.
I'm smiling a little bit because I remember back 20 years ago and more to the, the perception that's, well, existed well beyond 2 decades, but about the perception that didn't work well in Illinois' favor as, when we kind of were, I don't want to say looked down upon by St. Louis, but a little bit that we were farm ground and we didn't have the sophistication or whatever, the network to consider us for business opportunities. And I feel like with this, the perception sort of, has it flipped, or is our original, sort of anecdotal reputation of being a bunch of farm ground maybe going to work in our favor when St. Louis developers don't have any more ground?
You, when you look at the Illinois market and the perception that Missouri has of Illinois, what they see is the Route 3 corridor, the heavy industrial. That's the front steps to the Metro East market. And it's all the heavy manufacturing. And there is beyond that, when you hit the 255 corridor and the 270 corridor, where all the distribution, the warehousing, that's where you see, the other markets above the bluff, Edwardsville, Collinsville, O'Fallon, Shiloh, where you're seeing more of the office and even some more of the distribution. But the heavy manufacturing is that Route 3 corridor. And that is you can thumb your nose at it, depending on where you're at, but that is a major important factor to the Metro East market, with all the heavy industrial zoning, all the infrastructure that's there with the barge, the rail, all the interstates that are coming through there. And there's not too many communities that welcome heavy industrial manufacturing in their neighborhoods. And here you have it. So call it what you want. I see it as a huge asset for the region. A big component to that ag coast of America is really on that Illinois side, where you're seeing all the rail yards, the barge access, the terminals, and that's very critical for the industrial market.
Oh, I'm sure. I know you can clarify this for me. When you talk about the heavy industrial users versus the last mile consumer goods, Amazon user, it's really you're not just looking for how many square feet somebody's thirsty for. It's really 2 different users, right? I mean, your consumer goods guy probably wouldn't be looking along the Route 3 corridor.
No, not at all. They're looking for that interstate access and on and off the interstate very quickly. And that is the consumer goods products, the distribution, the Amazons, the Spectrum, the Walgreens, Unilevers, Amazons, Worldwide Technologies, to name a few. Whereas when you're seeing, along the heavy manufacturing corridor, you're looking at all the chemical companies, the steel mills, the ag businesses, the grain, the coals, the Watco and the SCF Marine type of businesses over there. So that's what you're seeing, the difference between the 2, heavy industrial manufacturing and then what you're seeing in the distribution warehousing.
That makes sense. Talk a little bit about the capacity that we have or don't have left. I know you mentioned Eastport Plaza in Collinsville, that spec 62,000 square foot spec building. I know we've got Sauget Business Park. We've got, certainly Gateway Commerce Center. What capacity do we have left for not even necessarily build to suit, but for that, $500,000 and up or 250,000 square foot and up?
So
modern
Gateway
industrial.
Commerce Center, this is an estimate, a guess. I'd say they've probably got maybe 100 acres available at Gateway Commerce Center. earlier. Tradeport, where North Point is operating, they've probably got about 500 acres left.
Is that the one in Pontoon Beach?
That is the one in Pontoon Beach,
okay.
yeah. So they've got a lot of runway left on their park. Panatone and Lakeview, there's probably only 100 or so acres left over there to build on. That was a smaller park than North Point and Gateway. But it all started with Gateway Commerce Center with TriStar, and that's what really put Illinois on the map and really drove that warehousing 3PL type of industry and is really the crown jewel of the whole St. Louis market.
Sure. Do you see as capacity, what you just mentioned, doesn't sound like a lot of capacity left to me, even in the Metro East area. Do you see that availability of ground, moving northward towards like the middle of the state? Or, where do you see when you have clients looking that you can't place somewhere, immediately in the region?
So right now there's plenty of ground that, within the next 5 years may get gobbled up. We'll see how strong things go in the next year or two. But when you go into the Dupo area, there is next to the Union Pacific rail yard and the large development that's eventually going to be planned there. We're still waiting on IDOT to get the infrastructure from the road access interchange, but I believe that's on the books now. So it sounds like that's coming. We've got plenty of ground out in Mascoutah. So we've got plenty of acreage to move to that's zoned industrial and going south in Dupo and working further east into the Mascoutah area. And what you're getting there as well is a different workforce. So that's one of the major issues that you have with some of these parks is where are you going to find the employees? Where's the labor pool coming from?
Exactly.
So going further east and going further south, you're in a little different demographic with labor pool. And that's what's going to probably drive those industries, those parks.
It's so fascinating to me as, schedules get expedited and it seems like these warehouses you mentioned before, distribution warehouse are on, super expedited schedules. And with the whole still uncertain supply chain and everything, getting these things built in the time that the owners want them done. I wouldn't want to be a contractor. That sounds super stressful to meet those schedules.
Yeah, I've talked to quite a few of them and, it's a balancing act and it's even more difficult for some of them in different communities where you've got some communities work at the speed of business and others put up a lot of roadblocks. So it kind of depends on where you're going and what you're dealing with. And that's probably another issue that I see a lot of developers really vocalizing is the communities that they work in and how some of them are just difficult. So that's something that needs to be with a lot of these communities that they need to have a strategic plan in place. And they're going to be in the game in the industrial market. They need to know where they're going to put these industrial sites, make sure all the infrastructure is available to those sites, what kind of incentives are coming, because people take the path of least resistance. And if you don't have all of these things in place, ready to go, they're going to go somewhere else. And it's a very competitive market out there. So that's one thing that communities really need to be focused on if you want industrial in your community. And that's really, I think, a catalyst anymore for communities to grow and try to bring jobs to the community, which will hopefully bring people to their community, as a lot of communities have lost population decline in the last several years. And I think that industrial manufacturing can be a catalyst to grow your communities. And retail follows rooftops, and it always has in the demographics. So all the communities in the past seem like they've always just been going after that retail sales tax. And, it's just retail's just changed so much. And a lot of it's with that e-commerce, shipping it from warehouses, ordering it online, and that's kind of the new brick and mortar. So
Exactly. You mentioned a little bit about working with developers, and I'm wondering, and you talked about two municipalities that have their game together. They have their stats and they have their information the way developers want to digest it and site selectors. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how BARBERMURPHY, how you interact with the development community and maybe how you really are a trusted advisor. You get it, Steve. I know you all do over there on what people want, how quickly they want it. And that seems critical because that whole development community seems like they talk together a lot and they know who's got what they need when they need it. And how does BARBERMURPHY sort of interact with the developers across the region and across the country? Because they've got to be a different breed, especially now.
Well, it's a tough question, to be honest with you.
It was kind of a rambling one.
Yeah, We're working with the communities more so than we have in the past, and especially even through the Leadership Council with the new strategic plan that we've put out for economic development, and trying to have these conversations well in advance of when you're developing ground or when you have ground that could be available for industrial purposes. It takes years to get it from a farm ground to a developed site. It just doesn't happen overnight. You might get lucky, but it's like I said, it's very competitive, and you got to make sure you have your incentives in place, your utilities are ready to go. And when somebody comes to your community and has it ready to go, that's what we try to work with those communities in advance and say, hey, be prepared, because when somebody comes knocking on your door, you got one shot at it. And if you're not ready, you lose out. So some communities get it, some don't. Some want it, some will never get it. It's just something that we've had to deal with, and we work in the communities that have embraced it and are willing to put the time and energy into it and make it happen.
That's awesome. Great. Good answer to a confusing question I tossed out there. So anything else you'd like to add, I guess, as we look forward and we look at not only the Metro East, but the St. Louis region, both sides, and this, hungry appetite for industrial real estate. I can't imagine you don't see it continuing over the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. What's your crystal ball?
My crystal ball is it's just still on fire. It will continue to be on fire. The different industry clusters that make up the St. Louis and Illinois market, food and beverage has been strong. We've got a Tyson's plant building a 170,000 square foot facility in Caseyville, Illinois. You've got AB, American Food Groups, expanding. All the consumer goods that's just been blowing it up. The PG, Procter & Gamble's, Levers, Walgreens, Spectrum, Train, James Hardy. Those are some new ones in the market, but it's all the consumer goods types of companies. We're having a lot in the energy sector, tons of solar companies that are really getting in the market. And you're seeing more companies embracing solar and coming here for solar fields. And so that's another aspect of it. In the automotive and call it transportation industries, Tesla, which just put in a 600,000 square foot facility at a trade port in Pontoon Beach. Piston Automotive, Boeing, the Boeing facility that's going on in Mascouda right now, manufacturing the drones. That's a huge opportunity for the region. But those are the ones that you're really seeing the most activity in, is the food and beverage, consumer goods, and the automotive. Distribution in our area will always be strong because of all the interstates that are coming into the St. Louis market. So that'll never change. And it's a good thing to have.
Exactly. I'm glad you mentioned the electric vehicle and manufacturing. So that's certainly a big part of what's going on in our region. Well, in this episode, we've been delighted to learn from Steve Zuber, managing principal at BARBERMURPHY. And Steve, I really thank you for being here today and just sharing with us the pulse of the industrial market in the St. Louis region. And thank you for being a part of one of the first guests on Build St. Louis. Appreciate your trust in me on that. And please know that you're welcome to join us again anytime. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Kerry, and appreciate the opportunity.